Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. This is 4 o'clock, so I call the Public Works and Transportation Committee meeting to order. May I have a mover for the minutes?
So moved.
Moves, second. Call the question. Those in favor, oppose, carry. So next meeting will be December the 14th, 4 o'clock, same place. Is there any addition to the agenda? I know that there's one item that Councilor Manetti would like to add, so I put under 7A, before manager's report regarding some parking regulations. And Michael?
Thank you. Through the chair, it's not an additional item. I just wanted, in case there was no manager's report, I just had a couple of questions.
Sure.
Thanks.
Yep. Okay. Without any changes to the agenda, record meeting. Item number 1, shortcoming update on Bench Drive and Ferry Drive. Fred, any information, new information for the report?
Mr. Chair, nothing new to add. Happy to answer questions.
Okay, so I would like to ask staff. We have a speaker, right? We have a delegation. Yes. Okay, so we would like to invite a delegate, Mr. Steve Badishah, to come to speak. So you have 5 minutes.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah, I'm a resident of Barnes Drive. I'm also a former municipal firefighter as well as wildland firefighter. I'd like to share some of my experiences that have happened at low speed impacts, as opposed to higher speed impacts. There's a lot of information that we've gone through and is available at a federal and provincial level. But one of the reasons that this is very important is that when we have something that can be prevented, and certainly an option is choosing a low-speed accident over responding to a high-speed, the impact that it has on family members, loved ones, surviving family members, including first responders, it's a responsibility as first responders that we take to respond to these incidents. And that's what we're trained for. What we're not trained for is the impact and the casualty, loss of life, the severity of injuries. There's really nothing that prepares for us when we arrive at an accident scene and there's people screaming in pain. There's the potential of a fire. There's potential of some vehicle impacting a power pole or even a vehicle impacting a pedestrian or a cyclist. It's a very heavy burden that is placed on first responders. For us to respond to slow speed or low speed impacts, the severity of the injuries and generally the rate of fatalities is greatly reduced. The higher the speed, the more severity of the impact and the injuries and the fatalities. And the fallout from high impact accidents, even a difference of 20 kilometers an hour, it doesn't matter if you're traveling 50 kilometers an hour and you strike a pedestrian, or you're doing 120 and you hit oncoming traffic or a larger object. At 50 kilometers an hour, the impacts that the pedestrian experiences and the injuries is very severe. And if there's anything that we can do to prevent that, even an option of reducing the speed, if it doesn't save one life, it has the potential of saving many lives. The responsibilities that are placed on us, as well as policymakers, whether it's federal, provincial, or municipal, it's one of those things that you can't put on paper, and you can't explain it even in a video. You actually have to be front line, right on the scene, to see how it impacts. I had prepared to use every minute of this 5 minutes in explaining different variations, and I can approach this from many different directions. But at the end of the day, the impact it does place is pretty heartbreaking for anyone that's exposed to that experience, bystanders, loved ones, even first responders. So all I ask of the council is to review this from the eyes of someone who's lost somebody or has observed somebody losing. And I think that's as far as I would like to go in discussing this. I would like to now excuse myself and please just don't look at the stats or the possibility of, we haven't had that many fatalities. One's too much. Two's too much. Every winter months we see lots of pedestrians hit. And if someone was hit at 30 kilometers an hour, I think we can all acknowledge that the injuries would not be that severe as being hit by a 3,000 to 5,000 pound vehicle at 20 kilometers faster at 50. So please take that into consideration in the decisions that are made this evening and moving forward. Thank you for my time, and I appreciate all the effort everyone is going to be placing on this issue today.
Thank you.
Goodbye.
Okay, so any questions for staff? Okay, Andy. Andy?
Can't hear you.
Searching for the mute. Thank you very much. I think Mr. Adisha is still there. Thank you for your presentation. I can tell that you've seen some themes that have impacted you. So just a couple questions on the report, and thanks to staff for the report. I've realized from some past experience myself that traffic issues are an issue that are shared almost in every single neighborhood of every single city. So with the study itself, just on page 14, I just want to confirm a couple things and ask a couple questions. I take it the highest speed from the report was 56K and the average was 26K. Perhaps I missed it, but what was the number of vehicles? Do we have that? The total number of vehicles that went through there? And I also take it that there really wasn't anybody in that study that wasn't connected to the neighborhood somehow, either living there, visiting someone or something because of the nature of the road. And I just wanted to ask about the crash history there as well. There were 4 and 4 years from 2016 to 2020. I did want to make a quick inquiry as to the type of injuries. And were those vehicle related in terms of being in a vehicle, or were they pedestrians or cyclists?
Mr. Lee?
Through the chair to Councillor Hobbs, with respect to your first question, we do have the exact traffic volume data available. I don't have the specific details right now, but we can certainly provide that. But what I can say is that the volume is fairly low, even for a local street. With respect to your second question, which relates to the 4 collisions, I believe. One of them, I believe, related to someone backing out of the driveway, and then the other one related to someone not yielding the right-of-way at the T intersection. None of them were attributed to vehicle speeding. And sorry, what was your third question, Councillor Hobbs?
It was just about, I think you've answered it more or less. It was about the injuries that have happened over the last 4 years. And if we could just follow up with a couple more. Regarding lowering the speed limit, is something that I think is generally supported, but it's not a surprise to me that you'd have a significant chunk of residents in any neighborhood that would support a lower speed limit other than 50. Although I do find that often in neighborhoods such as this one, people tend to go lower than 50 kilometers in any case. So, especially when you're entering a cul-de-sac or a crescent. But just to make one point about enforcement and the difference between an advisory sign and a posted speed limit, I'm getting some feedback, so it's a little distracting to me. So I apologize for my distracted question. But the enforcement by police, I'd just like to point out, kind of a rhetorical question, but it's unlikely that the police would ever do enforcement in a neighborhood such as that, because they're busy on high crash locations and intersections. And for the 30K zones, they're probably paying attention to schools and playgrounds and that type of thing, and it would be based upon complaint. So just to point out, I wouldn't want anybody to get any false expectations that police would be, actively going out and enforcing that kind of speed limit in that type of situation. It's unlikely to happen, and it would be prioritized and probably lower than some other priorities. But that relates to this question. Have we looked at a general lower speed limit for neighborhoods? I mean, these things come up one at a time, and that's fine. But school zones and playgrounds are one thing. But have we looked at, for instance, a 40K speed limit that would be applied to neighborhoods like this, and we proactively go out and do that?
Through the chair to Councillor Hobbs, certainly staff have considered lower speed limits. In fact, we think that having a lower speed limit on local street in general is a good idea in terms of traffic safety. That being said, though, not all neighborhoods are the same. Some neighborhoods may think that a lower speed limit is a good thing. Some may not. And therefore, staff's approach has been that if there's any request for lower speed on local street, they are reviewed on a case-by-case basis, and we will ensure follow-up with a fairly robust consultation effort with the neighborhood before presenting any recommendations to council for consideration.
Sure, I appreciate that, and that does make sense, and I'm not advocating carte blanche anything, but certain types of neighborhoods. Anyway, thank you very much, and I will support the recommendation. Thank you.
Okay. Councillor Wu.
Thank you. Through the chair, just two quick questions, one to staff and one to the delegate if he's still available. The question to staff, with our community safety committee, we often get a map from the fire and a map from the RCMP that shows where locations are. Do we happen to know if those 4 crashes that are referred to in the report, were they all on the same road at the same intersection? That's the staff.
Through the chair to Councillor Wolf, we do have the specific locations that we can provide to the committee, but those collisions happen within the subdivision.
Okay, I appreciate that. To make the decision today, I think having the fact that if they all happen on one of the roads at one of the intersections, that would help. The question to the delegate is, I'm not sure if he's still on. I don't see him. No, I guess he's not on. Unless staff can answer. Here? No. My question then would be, do we know which street people are picking up the speed and causing the concern for residents? I wanted to hear from a resident in the area. I grew up. I went to Cranberry School. I had a friend who lived in this little area. But the road sections are so short. Sometimes it's people picking up the speed on Bath, and maybe they carry that through. So my concern is that in the description in the report it mentions Barnes and Fleury, but maybe it's Bath that's really the target, so that we slow people down at the start as opposed to the loop. Anyhow, I guess the question to staff then is, can we include Bath with the other 2 roads in the traffic calming update?
Through the chair to Councillor Wolf, the feedback that we heard from the residents in the 2 virtual online meetings that we have with them related to Barnes as well as Fleury, It wasn't so much related to Bath.
Okay, I appreciate that. Thanks.
Okay, Councillor McPhail.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and through you to staff. Well, thank you very much for the report. I know you've done a lot of work in this area, and I do agree with the recommendation in the package. Just a question, if this was to go ahead, what is the communication with the neighborhood? What would that be like going forward, since, you know, there wasn't really a lot of consensus about ideas on how to solve the issue. I know there would be new signage, and sometimes we see signs that say new signs, and, or, you know, new, anyways. So what would the communication, if this was to go forward?
To the chair, to Councillor McPhail, certainly staff would inform those residents that attended the 2 information meetings, as well as, depending on the feedback, we could send out letters just to inform all the entire neighborhood of the outcome.
All right, thanks very much.
Well, now, if we pass this recommendation today, is there any time period for further review?
Through the chair, staff's recommendation is for the permanent installation. Of course, after the installation, staff would monitor the situation, and should there be any adjustment necessary, those will be reviewed as well.
Okay, very good. Okay, any further questions?
Move the recommendation.
Moved. Any seconder? Second. Any further discussion? So I call the question. Those in favor? Opposed? Motion carried. Thank you very much. So the next item, TransLink 2022 cost share funding applications. Mr. Lin, any comments or further information?
Nothing to add, Mr. Chair. Just happy to answer questions.
Any questions? Seeing none?
Move the recommendation.
Move. Any seconder? Move second.
Second.
Okay, any Hobbs? Councillor Hobbs, you have a question?
Can't hear you.
Thanks. Yeah, I mean, I support the recommendation because it's all good news. But and some of the projects were actually quite good, like improving the Garden City multi-use pathway. On the bus stops, with the upgrades, I was a little bit surprised that there's still that many that require accessibility upgrades. And although it's good that we're in the region. But what's an example of the typical major inaccessibility that's being upgraded, considering most buses now have the ability to lower themselves and everything for accessibility? Are those just curb ramp types of upgrades, or what would they typically be?
Through the chair, to Councillor Hobbs, typical improvements included in this program is to upgrade bus stops so that they will be wheelchair accessible. So that could include the bus landing pads. If there's no walkway leading to that landing pad, walkway could be included as part of the program as well to the nearest intersection.
Okay, thanks. And just regarding the funding ratio on page 21, I was just curious, and I realize it's not approved yet, it's a 10-year plan, but is that a fairly typical funding ratio? You mentioned the $5.09 million for projects totaling $14.4 million. So is that fairly typical? And the other one with the structures program, the city paying 50%, optimistically speaking, is that what we typically optimistically hope to achieve with TransLink funding?
Yeah, through the chair to Councillor Hobbs, that is very typical.
Okay. Well, thank you very much.
Okay, Councillor Wolf.
Thank you. Through the chair to staff, I have questions on 2 of the projects listed in the report. The first one I'd like to refer to is the Cambie and Number 4 Road. So it's described in further detail on page 22 of our package, BWT 22. And at the top there, it mentions Cambie Road and Number 4 Road, left turn lanes on all 4 legs, and other features. My specific corner question is the northeast corner. And if you picture this intersection, and I grew up in this block area. I can't think of another intersection that's had more crashes. And I think part of it is because people just came off the highway, off the Oak Street Bridge, and they took the 4 Road exit, and they're still wanting to fly fast. That's the main reason I've seen accidents happen. Anyway, my question on the northeast corner, that's where there's a really large significant tree, and it is in the city's significant tree inventory. Right now, the sidewalk, the asphalt, it barely wraps around the tree. So my question is, there's no details here, but there's a lot of residents in the area who are aware of this tree and its significance. My question is, could we not consider, and maybe it would not fit in this proposal here, but could we not look for funding to go around the tree on the northeast side? So because there's space, we could create a wooden boardwalk that would give pedestrians or cyclists another way to get around the intersection if they're going right, as opposed to standing right at the corner. It's a little bit daunting because the high speed of traffic and the narrowness of the sidewalk, and the asphalt is kind of uneven as well. So could that be part of this project, a boardwalk that would go around the significant tree?
Through the chair to Councillor Wolf, the objective of this project is to improve the intersection safety. And through the network study that staff have conducted a couple of years back, which identified the top 20 locations, the primary cause for collisions at this location is the lack of left turn lanes. This is not so. Therefore, this project, the main objective is to install the left turn lanes on all 4 lanes of the intersection. This is not to say that as part of the project, staff would also look for opportunities to ensure that all 4 corners of the intersection will be walkable. However, instead, in terms of using the wooden boardwalk, that's something that is a bit unusual, and it doesn't meet the typical engineering standards in terms of it could be some sort of tripping hazard, if you will. So I think at council's direction, that can be staff can look into that at council's direction. But at this time, a wooden boardwalk is not considered on that corner of the intersection as part of the project.
Okay, thank you. Through the chair, just to follow up on this one then before I go to my second intersection. We had a previous item that was brought to this committee, and I approved it thinking we would get a second look, but 40 trees were cut down to put in an asphalt trail in a very similar item like this that I did approve. So my question then is, by approving this today, will that large significant tree be potentially removed, or would that come back to this committee before a decision like that would be made?
Through the chair to Councillor Wolf, based on the information that we have right now, there's no plan to further widen the sidewalk on that corner of the intersection. Of course, that kind of detail will be confirmed in the detailed design stage of the project. And should there be any impact to that trees, definitely staff, that will need to be dealt with in the detailed design stage of the project.
Thank you. Through the chair, I hope that design phase would then require a vote, because as opposed to just getting a memo, I don't feel that would be adequate for the significance of this intersection. Anyway, my second intersection point is on the same page, page 22, and it's the Westminster Highway and number 5 Road. It was referred to multiple times in the report because obviously there's a lot of work to be done there. Lots of accidents there as well. I go through the intersection once a day at least. My question is actually in regards to, I know the province has a big role to play in drainage around there, and I'm asking partially because I'm the council liaison for the Nature Parks Society, and I know that they have been looking into how that intersection can be improved for safety of people visiting the park, as well as the impact to the drainage, and that we're now talking about the northwest corner of that intersection. So there's nowhere in this report that specifies any impacts to drainage or cooperation with the province to facilitate some of the ongoing challenges that the city's nature park is facing. Would that potentially come up if this were to be approved and go forward, that there would perhaps be communication between the city and the province on how to deal with some of the water issues in that corner?
Through the chair to Councillor Wolf, the objective of this project is really to improve the safety of the intersection. If there's any impact to drainage, certainly there could be some discussion in terms of how the intersection drainage would be dealt with. I see that Mr. B has want to speak on this question as well.
Through the chair to Councillor Wolf. A couple things. One is that with this report, all we're doing is we're asking for permission to ask for funding from TransLink. All of these projects have already approved or will be approved or will be presented through the next capital plan. With respect to this specific project at Westminster Number 5 Road that we have, it is about traffic safety. It wouldn't be detrimental to drainage or anything like that. But I do know that drainage in that area is a priority. Being part of the capital team, I know there is some discussion around what can be done at the nature park in this regard, and I believe that there will be projects coming forward in the 2022 capital plan for council's consideration in that regard. Additionally, I know that engineering is working very hard on the issue around Highway 99, which is not far from there with respect to that drainage. And I don't know if they're on this call and want to comment on that at this point in time, but the drainage is not specifically, or improving drainage was not specifically a part of this project, but that doesn't mean that there won't be any future or projects that coincide with this one that do address the drainage.
Thank you very much. But through the chair, just no further questions, just a comment. I know many staff members who work at the nature park and visitors who use the bus stop right out front. It's just further west of this intersection. And many times that unsecured bench, the bus stop bench, is pushed over. So clearly this is an area that needs greater attention and this type of a project. So thanks for bringing this application forward. I'll pass it along that the work is being done. Thanks.
Very good. Councillor Liu?
Thank you, through the chair. Thank you for this. And, I'm super excited that the number 2 road multi-use pathway is going to be extended and that we're asking for some help with this. And I'd love to see and understand the design for that, because I know it's a tricky space, that Easton and 2 road. So we've got that multi-use path, and then it kind of goes to a sidewalk. And so bicyclists are kind of in that weird gray zone of where they're supposed to go at the north end of the number 2 road path at 2 and Easton, if you can envision it with me. And then if you're going up the east side of 2 road, if it's a multi-use path, then I guess it's 2 ways for the bicyclists all the way up to Wallace, right? So, what are we envisioning? How are we envisioning that's going to look like? And, so I'd love to see it when it comes forward. And then my other question is, when do we decide to do raised crosswalks? So, I think of the raised crosswalk on Moncton Street that crosses number 2 road, and it's sort of this no reason raised crosswalk there. And it's kind of a strange spot for me to have that. But then I think of the Garden City multi-use path that we're talking about here, and that Garden City and Saunders, where it crosses Saunders, that intersection's had a ton of accidents over the years. When we've done some work on it to make some traffic calming, and I think we've had a lot of improvements there. I've since moved away from it, but when I lived there, on average, every 6 to 8 weeks, there'd be an accident at that corner. So in my opinion, that Garden City multi-use path, to have a raised crosswalk there at the Saunders intersection, where that one goes through there, that would be a good thing for it. Do we have a policy on when and where we put raised crosswalks, or can we look into having one, or can we recommend one for that spot?
Loy?
Through the chair to Councillor Liu, the policy that we have around traffic calming is that if the neighborhood can agree on what they'd like for traffic calming, that gives me the authority to introduce that. Otherwise, it has to be endorsed by council. And that's why we were brought forward the previous report. Also, if there's any change in speed, that has to be endorsed by council. So generally, with respect to raised crosswalks, as with a lot of other traffic calming features that we offer when people are concerned about speed and accidents in their neighborhoods and things like that, it's one of the suite of tools. But we don't have a specific policy around putting them at specific intersections or anything like that.
Okay, or in conjunction with, and then all our multi-use paths are fairly new, right? And so I think within that whole, like the long stretch, to put them in there, it makes sense, right? So like say on, when Maddox meets Shell Road, that kind of spot, so that you don't come flying off Maddox and into Shell Road. But of course, it doesn't continue on, so it doesn't really matter there. But there are some places where, especially where there's a multi-use path, that then it does make sense to have something. So to give more preference to the pedestrians and the people in the path than to the preference to the cars on the street, if you will.
Yeah.
So like, I think it's Parksville Drive or something up on the railway. So on railway, they have all these huge bollards to protect the pedestrians from walking into the traffic instead of raising the crosswalk and making it slowing the traffic down for where the pedestrians are going to be.
Through the chair to Councillor Liu, staff doesn't disagree with installing raised crosswalks at all. We think that there's a lot of utility to them. However, like speed bumps or speed humps, raised crosswalks are similarly controversial with some members of the public. At council's direction, we're happy to install them in many of these locations. But at the end of the day, like I said, my authority extends only to those areas that they agree to have them. But with council direction, we can certainly do that sort of thing.
Okay. I'll think about this one, maybe come back with a referral at another time. Thanks.
Okay, now the motion has already been moved and seconded. Are there further discussions or questions? So call a question. Those in favor? Opposed? Motion carried. Good. Moving on, item number 3, award of contract.
Mr. Chairman, it's Suzanne Bycraft. We have nothing to add to the report.
Okay. Questions? Michael?
Thank you through the chair to staff. Just a quick one on this one. Well, a couple things that I noted in there. One is that there was only one vendor that made the bid. I guess my first question is, are there many other companies out there that just chose not to make the bid?
Through the chair to Councillor Wolf, it is somewhat of a specialty piece of equipment, but there are other vendors who chose not to bid. I estimate there's approximately 3 that could provide it, but chose not to bid.
Thank you. And then my second question through the chair to staff is part of this proposal here, or staff recommendation, is to get a cab and chassis that is city-owned that would be retrofitted to have this combo installed on it, and that we would get a new cab and chassis. Do we not have an existing cab and chassis that could be utilized for that?
Through the chair to Councillor Wolf, no, nor would we recommend putting it on a used cab and chassis, just because of the wear and tear that this type of equipment has to do and go through. We do recommend that we put a new cab and chassis on it. Any of our old cab and chassis or vehicles are put through an auction process, so they do get a second chance at more use elsewhere.
Oh, okay. Thank you. Then no further questions. Just a comment then that I appreciate the need for this type of project, and we'll be supporting it. Just to know that the conditions that we are dealing with right now, I'm sure we could use one of these tomorrow. So I appreciate the timely nature of this item. Thank you.
Okay. Linda?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. My question was on the bidding process, and it's been answered, so thank you.
Andy?
Thank you for the chair. I realize this is a like-for-like issue, and I've seen these in operation, and they're quite spectacular. So just one quick question is, and I'm happy to see that it's going for auction as well. That is very good. How old is the current piece of equipment, and what's the life expectancy on the new one?
Through the chair to Councillor Hobbs, the existing unit that's being replaced is approximately 10 years old. So it's 2011. It has over 14,000 hours on this piece of equipment, so it is well used. Generally, we would like to replace these types of pieces of equipment because of how they're utilized in approximately 8 years. So this one will be set on an 8-year lifespan.
Okay, thanks. Yeah, it's heavy-duty use. Thank you.
Okay. So there's a staff recommendation.
Move the recommendation.
Move. Second. Any further discussion? Call a question. Those in favor? Opposed? Motion carry. Item number 4, award of contract 6437F. Any new information?
Through the chair, no additional information at this time. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Are there any questions? Andy?
Yeah, thanks. So the recommendation, I'll be supporting it, and it makes sense, of course, that it's standardized equipment and parts, and there's interoperability, so I appreciate that. The question would be, with one supplier here and one manufacturer, and I realize it's a low probability of this happening, but the risk would be high. What's the contingency plan if one of those no longer is in business?
Through the chair to Councillor Hobbs, one of the considerations that we looked at when we entered into negotiations with this supplier was their longevity of their business, how long they've been in practice, their ability to have inventory in stock. Careful consideration went into that. It is our recommendation that this company's got a proven track record and is a business model that will have them in place for a long period of time. We will also have additional pumps in our inventory, not only for the purpose that you've described, but for the purpose of some redundancies. If we do have a failure, we could quickly make that adjustment.
Sure, and that makes sense. And like I said, I support the recommendation, and it's logical. And I also like the fact that the company is willing to donate used parts to programs like DCIT and Kwantlen. So that's a real plus too. So thank you.
Okay. Alexa?
Thank you, through the chair. Thank you for this report. I too was going to comment on the donation of the used pumps and parts. It seems like a pretty good deal, and it seems like we're locking in prices 2% per annum to reflect cost increases for the first, third, fourth, and fifth year of the agreement, that kind of stuff. So I think that's quite good. I'm just wondering, would it have made sense to be in a 10-year agreement for this, or is that not something we do? It seems like we're getting a good deal. Now I realize we only had one person bidding on it, but it seems to be laid out quite well.
Through the chair to Councillor Liu, we entered this negotiation with this particular company through a notice of intent to contract, which allowed us the ability to have a negotiation. We looked at a variety of terms, and we felt that 5 years produced the best value to the city of Richmond. Also, from the supplier manufacturer side, what they were willing to entertain, and we got into a spot where 5 years met that relationship between the vendor and the supplier, and we were both in a spot where we could initial that agreement and put it in front of this committee and then eventually council.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. So is there a mover for the recommendation?
Move the recommendation.
Second.
Second.
Any further questions or discussion? I call a question. Those in favor? Opposed? Motion carry. And then now we go to Item 5, change order approval, contract 6715P. Staff, any further comments? Any information?
Mr. Chair, there's no additional information at this time. Happy to answer any questions.
Michael?
Thank you. Through the chair to staff on this one. My question actually comes from the experience that some societies and groups in Richmond have faced when it comes to hiring traffic control services for city events. Mm-hmm. So these are events held on city land, but to deal with the traffic of those events, basically it's the largest expense of these groups that are working with the city. My question is there any potential language that could be brought in so that if it's a standard, like basically you can't go in the driveway, go ahead, keep driving, can there not be like a different rate that we don't basically city events are sometimes not happening, and I've heard the decisions being made because the traffic control services the cost is too high for them to go ahead. So I'm not sure if there's a way that if we're expanding this program and we're making a more valuable contract for the company, if we cannot find a way to simplify and streamline some of the processes where it's a regular event and it's just you can't pull in that driveway, keep moving. I don't see why it has to be the same cost for someone who's developing a multi-million-dollar project and is building right up to the road, so they don't have a way to put their vehicles on the property. They're stuck on the road. Why is there not a discrepancy in the cost for traffic services? And maybe there is. Please clarify to me if there is. Thanks.
Through the chair to Councillor Wolf, if I've understood your question correctly, I'll speak to it and then you can confirm. When this went out to the public bidding process, we received, if my memory serves me correct, 6 companies submitted their bids, and we reviewed their unit costs in those bids, and we awarded this to a primary, secondary, and tertiary company. And the primary company was the lowest bid submission. In that submission, there's multiple services that are included in the contract. One is for a basic traffic control person, meaning they're not showing up with a vehicle and all the signage. Then there's a traffic control technician that will come in and provide a full service and provide the signage, and it's almost a one-stop shop. And then there's the traffic management plan that can become very complicated, where months ahead of time they'll provide and lay out what a traffic management plan to make sure it meets the regulation and whatever user group is using its needs. If I've not answered the question, please clarify.
Thank you. Through the chair to staff, you did, and thank you for recommending an option that provided the 3 options. Unless there was another company that offered 5 options, maybe that would have been more applicable to the issues that I've come across. But thank you for the recommendation.
Okay, Andy.
Thank you, through the chair. So it's a significant increase, obviously. Anybody can see that. And I understand that the initial estimate was impacted by COVID, and the 10,000 hours quoted has been increased due to a number of factors, primarily related to that. So when I look at Table 1, and I look at the 1, 2, 3 years projected there, clearly COVID has impacted year 1 and probably year 2. In year 3, there's still a significant increase. So is that, I would hope that the impact of COVID would subside by then. So that increase is due to other factors that you've mentioned in the report. For instance, there's just more projects and more larger projects. So that would be impacting it, I take it. And also, I'm just curious if the traffic control standards have changed at all. And I mean, has that increased the number of personnel required, as COVID did, for instance? And is that, those standards primarily through WorkSafe? And have they changed at all, impacting the costs?
Through the chair to Councillor Hobbs, I'll answer the first part of your question. The additional cost in year 3, the initial contract took the previous 3 years into consideration, and the projections going forward were based on those. That's the 10,000 hours during the weekday, 500 after hours, and 500 on weekends. Those were based on the previous 3 years. COVID certainly had a significant impact, particularly in the recycling depot. Some of the other things that are having an impact is the location of our capital projects. Bridgeport, for example, very complicated traffic control system there that required additional resources. The second part, or the second question you had, 2 governing bodies oversee the traffic control regulations, so the Ministry of Transportation, and then WorkSafe that oversees all work in the province. You may have heard on the news over the last 10 years an increased awareness around cone zones and the WorkSafe's efforts to make staff safe. So there is an increased awareness there, but the ministry has also tightened up some of the regulations and requirements on our traffic setups and what is required there.
Sure, and so in that tightening up, does that have a cost impact due to staffing and other implications? Through the Charter Council,
it does. It requires upfront additional efforts on the traffic management plans. Our transportation department does a great job in assisting us with that. But we do have to bring in a contractor to help put those technical plans together. And then the actual setup themselves can be is much more stringent than what it was in the previous decade.
Right. And thank you for that. And through the chair, I do support the recommendation. I appreciate the clarification. Thank you.
Okay, very good. Any further questions? So, recommendation being moved. Second. Call a question. Those in favor? Opposed? Motion carried. And then item number 6, update of snow and ice response preparations. This is a very timely item. Larry?
I can't seem to start my video. Oh, no.
No, we can hear you.
Okay. Okay. I have no further additions, and I'm here for questions.
Any questions? Michael? Michael?
Thank you. Through the chair, I'm very sorry not to see Larry Ford's face, but regardless, I do have a question for him. There's a number of areas in the city just in the last 6 months where I've seen driveways being paved, asphalt going right out into what I assume is the road. So if I'm traveling on, for example, River Road, the north arm, kind of near 8 Road, I watched this crew. I didn't see any city staff around, but they were putting in asphalt, flattening out the angle that they chose for the driveway, and ended up pushing a lot of excess right into the roadway. So if you're driving in your lane, you end up going up on your right-hand side to get over this really irregular shape. My concern is that when we have snow plows going along that route, which is very important, so we don't have cars going in the river, that they don't damage their equipment or they don't tip over into those really large ditches as a result of hitting these solid asphalt chunks that have been basically hardened on the roadway. So are we aware of these? Are we trying to get to deal with them before snow covers?
That one's a new, sorry, the chair to Councillor Wolf, that's a new one to me. That location, I'd be very interested in going out and having a look at that to see what we can do. That is not a normal process from what it sounds what you're describing.
Thank you. Through the chair, then I will forward you the closest address I can find. It's not marked, but I will forward that one. And there's also a few others along number 6 Road that I also feel are a little bit close to being clipped by snow removal trucks. Anyhow, I'll leave it at that. Thank you very much for being here in the dark.
Okay, Councillor Hobbs?
Thank you, through the chair. I thought it was a very thorough report, so thanks for that. And aside to my sister in Winnipeg, they've already had snow, so be thankful we're not there. Our 45 pieces of equipment, is that up or down for our equipment? And the second question is just, I really like the community involvement, the Snow Angels and the Good Neighbors. So, and we've done some of that in the past, and it's really helpful for seniors and other people. Do we promote that, and do we actively try to recruit more people to join into that, or how do people get into that? Thanks.
Certainly, through the chair to Councillor Hobbs. For your first question, yes, we have increased, not by many, but we've got 3 additional pieces of equipment that are brine capable, which we're staying away as much as we can from the rock salt and using brine, and more as a preventative maintenance than anything. And so we're up 3 pieces for that. And the Snow Angels, yes, it's promoted through parks quite heavily. Last year they had a record amount of participation, and I was talking to the gentleman today. They're still receiving volunteers, so they don't have a final number yet. They're not up to 119, but they do have a substantial number again coming in, which was wonderful. So.
Yeah, that's great, because I think there's some people out there doing that for neighbors and friends, and they might not be signed up. So we might be able to pump those numbers up. Thank you.
Certainly.
Councillor McPhail.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and through you to staff. I don't really have a question, just a comment, and I really agree with the communication strategy. And I recall with the last snow event, how many people did look forward to the reports that were pushed out through social media, especially with regards to the snow plowing on what were the priority routes and what were the secondary routes. So I really applaud you for that, and I think yesterday also showed that people were looking to our website for information, especially on traffic. So thank you.
Yes, I would agree that timely update and information is very important. Now, I just want to raise another issue. I know that a few weeks ago there was a court case at the, I think, Appeal Court of Canada, and it's related to snow removal in the city of Nelson, and the city removed snow on the parking lot, and the snow was being pushed to the sidewalk, and also a lady got herself injured when she was trying to go over the pile of snow. So I don't know if there's any concerns that we have in terms of any liability of snow removal issues. Suzanne?
Through the chair, we are aware of that case and have been reviewing the implications of it with our legal department to determine whether there are some issues that we need to look at operationally and or from a policy perspective. So that is under active review. If there are some changes that are necessary that require council attention, we will bring those forward. But in the meantime, it is under review. We're very familiar with the case. Very
good. But I also have one suggestion. I know that we are using trucks to remove the snows on the roads, right, on the main roads. And I noticed that very often along the crosswalks in the middle section, there's still piles of snow, because I think the trucks just move the snow to the middle, and then there's no cleaning follow-up, after the removal of the snow. So I don't know if, for example, at the intersection of number 3 and Garden City, can we have manpower to clean up those crossings when some snow is being piled up in the middle of the crosswalk?
Through the chair, the manpower that we send out, first of all, our priority is the roadways, and we'll continue to use the large trucks on that. The hand crews will go out and start to work on cleaning the street corners to allow pedestrians there, and as well the bus pads for transit users to get on and off the buses. The corners themselves also present a problem. We do try to get to them, but the hand crews, again, we're focusing on getting the areas available for the pedestrians to get across. Are you talking about the vehicular traffic coming out onto the road then?
Yes.
Sir? Okay. Yeah, it's difficult because we have so many intersections every time a plow goes past. They do try to swerve to try and bring it again out of that intersection and into the corner at a lower level, but it's a challenge,
Yes.
and
Okay.
we're aware of it, and we'll continue to work on it.
Okay, very good. Councilor Liu?
Thank you, through the chair. Following up on what you were just talking about there, Councillor Au, I'd actually like to make a referral to staff. I think it's time that we actually prioritize some of our walking routes, and that those have to be cleared first. So I know that there's other options available. We can get bobcats, we can get other things. I know that we're really trying to focus to get people who are living in our city center to not have vehicles. So we're trying to get them out of their vehicles, but then we're not making it easy for them to get to the transit sites or to the shopping malls, right? So we have to sort of maybe consider where we're trying to get the people from and to within our downtown core specifically, and including City Hall, and look at what the cost is to get the appropriate equipment out to clear the snow for those days. And so, I'd like to make a referral for staff to come back with a few options of some costs, and where we prioritize clearing some routes within the city center. So, and maybe some other key spaces like Steveston or 5 and Canby, some Steveston and Fiber. Like, I think there's some key places we know where we have a lot of foot traffic, where we want people to be able to still access things like groceries or key services. And we can get the technology or the equipment, but if we know how much it costs, or we create a plan to start making it more walk-friendly and suitable for people, this is going to make sense for us. And we can, if we have a few options, we can figure out how we're going to then fund this and roll this out as time moves forward.
Very
so
good.
I'll second for discussion.
Yes, okay. Move and seconded. Any further discussion?
Wait.
Linda?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I just have a question of staff. Do we do any of that now? Do we prioritize walking pathways now?
Through the chair to Councilor McPhail, no, we do not. We depend, for the majority, on the business owners and the homeowners to clean their sidewalks directly in front of their businesses. So we haven't taken that role on ourselves.
All right, thank you.
Okay. Michael?
Thank you. Through the chair on this this referral, my question is, it was referred to there as prioritizing walking areas in city center and Steveston, but I would I'm not sure if it needs to be entertained as a friendly amendment in the language, but that we work with every community center area in Richmond, so that Hamilton and Canby Community Center, every area where we have services that are provided to people, that we identify prioritized routes in all of those community center areas. And I know staff could probably comment on the fact that we have staff in those facilities who do provide clearing of the walkways in. But I think to get to those walkways is where there's also a challenge for people to get from the main street to the walkways, to get into those buildings under the extreme weather conditions that they might be facing.
Through the chair to Councillor Wolf, those facilities, and I'm not trying to pass the buck, but those are parks and recreation facilities. Again, they would be responsible for cleaning the sidewalk in front of those buildings as well as the access walkways to those buildings. They do have salt equipment and brine equipment as well to aid in cleaning those walkways. Yeah.
Okay, any further, John, you have some comments?
Yeah, so maybe I just add some comments here and tie it together with the previous question that you raised on with regards to the issue and the lawsuit there and the policy. So we do have an established level of service. Do arterial roads and as already identified, parks will clear buildings. As a property owner, is responsible to do that on sidewalks wherever they are. That's in our bylaw. So we can certainly bring back options for council to consider with regards to expanding the defined policy of what our service is. But that becomes something you really want to adequately fund. And it can get quite costly, but that brings the liability. So if you define a new level of service and you say, okay, we are going to now provide a clearing service on pedestrian routes, you want to be very explicit about exactly which routes you're going to service and that you have adequate funding in place to do that. Because if you fail to provide the service that you say you are, that's where the liability.
Andy?
Like I said, I'm looking for options. I think it makes sense.
Andy?
Yeah, if I understand the referral, I mean, it's a good idea to have a look at it. Just a quick comment about the problem in Richmond with snow is that it's so unpredictable from year to year. So the cost for having the equipment to have the worst case scenario that we maybe had 7 years ago, it's that cost benefit analysis is always hard. We don't live in Edmonton, so it's not that predictable. And so it'll be interesting to see what staff come up with for this, because the equipment is quite specific for certain sidewalk areas. And anyway, it'll be interesting. Hard to predict what will happen in Richmond from year to year.
Okay. Further questions? Discussions? Call a question on the referral motion. Those in favor? Opposed? Motion carry. Okay, going back to the staff recommendation on item 6.
Move, receive for information.
Move, second.
Second.
Call the questions in favor, opposed, motion carry. Very good. Now we go to number 7, a manager's report. I know that staff would like to comment on the rainfall in the last few days. Suzanne, are you making the comments?
Yes. Mr. Chairman, I can provide an overview, and then I have Mr. Ben Diaz, who was attending to the event, and Larry Ford here as well to answer questions, but I'd like to provide committee with an overview if that's acceptable to you.
Sure.
So our event started on this past Sunday evening, November 14th. The evening of the Sunday, the situation did seem to be stabilizing. However, that midnight, the Monday, we did start to experience more heavy rain, which continues. And over the period of the event, we received total rainfall of 118 to 138 millimeters. And our average rainfall for November is 175 millimeters. So we received 70% of a normal full month of November in 3 days. So it was significant. It was a 50-year, 24-hour return period event, and our system is designed for a 1 in 10, so it was substantially more than that. We were well organized corporately in our response. Operations, including Public Works and Parks, worked together, communications, emergency services, and our engineering team. We redeployed our resources from normal operations to support our weather response efforts. We had basically an all hands on deck, but also a backup resource capacity in the case of a sustained event. During the 3 days, we received approximately 600 calls through our Public Works Dispatch Center. 31 calls were related to tree issues. 6 were down trees, some of which impacted power lines. Our crews distributed over 2,000 sandbags to city sites and residents. And basically, our drainage systems performed very well. There were no major failures. The issue was the volume of water exceeding the capacity of the system. All 39 of the drainage pump stations that we have operated very well. We had some groundwater infiltration at our some sanitary stations that resulted in capacity issues there, but staff undertook measures such as sandbagging and or using the Vector truck to pump out some of the material to mitigate the potential for damage to those stations. So we did not incur damage to those stations. We assisted the public with sandbagging where people were attending to the work shard here, and we had Parks team were out helping residents with obtaining sandbags, as well as us delivering sandbags to high priority locations, particularly in those cases where, for example, residents were not able to attend themselves, elderly people. Our flat topography did result in water storage on the roads. Unfortunately, there were some homes on low-lying lots that took on water, but those raised properties were very well protected. The Gilbert and Blundell force main did cause significant flooding at that location. Our crews worked to sandbag to protect the properties, including some electrical rooms and some of the multifamily buildings to help protect those. Metro Vancouver is undertaking that repair now, and from what we understand, that repair is going very well. Highway 99 experienced significant flooding and was closed between Westminster Highway and the Highway 91 interchange to Shell. We expect the southbound lanes on Highway 99 will be open within the next few hours, and the northbound lanes will be open later this evening or tonight. The contractor for the ministry, Main Road Contracting, brought pumps in to help pump out some of that water. So staff will be reviewing that with Main Road and the Ministry of Transportation and Infrastructure to help identify some of the potential causes of the significant flooding at that location. We did review, and there were no blockages of the city system that contributed to that water buildup. And we will work with the Ministry of Transportation and Infrastructure to mitigate future issues, and that likely will include that nature park area that was mentioned earlier as well. Post-event, we will be doing debriefings. We will ensure that we're doing post-incident inspections of our key infrastructure, including some of the pump stations I mentioned and other infrastructure, just to ensure there was no other damage that occurred. And just like to highlight that we have been very well positioned with our infrastructure, with the level of support we've had from Council for our infrastructure and our infrastructure build-out, as well as community support. Many of the calls that we received in Public Works Dispatch from residents were surprisingly quite supportive, and they knew that we were doing all that we could to help residents through this situation. Mr. Ben Diaz is here with us and could answer more questions. He led our operational response as the manager of sewerage and drainage, and Mr. Larry Ford took over at around midnight, and I did see Mr. Larry Ford's face a lot, so I can attest that he was present. And I'd really like to thank all of the team here within Public Works, Parks, and throughout the city for the effort that they put into this event, and we're happy to answer any questions, Mr. Diaz, Mr. Ford, and myself. Thank you.
Michael?
Thank you. Through the chair, I have a couple questions that remain. I think they're all fairly short, and the team is here to answer them. I appreciate that. The first question, I guess I'll start with the 600 plus dispatch calls. I had been contacted by some people who had noted, and I didn't see this as being an extremely high priority, so I didn't pursue it. I don't know. Maybe I should have. If you could clarify. So a number of people have noticed things at the high tide and with this surge of water coming down. Large items that have been washed up at the high tide mark on the dike. And the concern is that I'm thinking of mattresses and large water storage tanks, like really weird items. And I observed a few of them as well that were up really high on the granite rock on the river side of our dike. which number on our should people be calling, and what's our time frame to get to those sites? Because I know with the next high tide that comes, it could just be gone, and it's a lot of effort to send a truck out there with the right equipment to be able to pull a really heavy item that's been saturated over the dike and take it. So is it the 24-hour dispatch line that residents should call, or is it a different one? And would have that been something a priority in the last few days, or would have something like that, because it wasn't a direct potential threat, maybe be less? But then again, I see it being a threat to the boat traffic, because it's not like the boats have stopped working in the river during these days. They're still out there in full force. And I just see a hazard there that may not be addressed. So comments on that?
Yeah, so perhaps I'll just address the question on the number to call. It is our Public Works 24-hour dispatch line. And then I'll ask Mr. Ford, who also is responsible for dike operation and maintenance, to address the priority issue on that.
Through the chair to Councillor Wolf, we would most probably get to that the next day. During this particular event, that would not have been a priority. We would have been out sandbagging, but by all means, please, whenever an item like that washes onto the riprap, let us know. We'll get it off probably the next day, I would suspect.
Thank you. Through the chair to staff on my next question. I just didn't have a long enough rope, otherwise I would have tied it to one of something that I couldn't reach. Anyway, my next question is about the king tide that's coming. I've read a few articles about the early December king tide. I think it's around December 6th, 7th, 8th. That is when it's going to be at its highest. So do we have any further preparations for that? And in relation to this question, I know that the Cranberry Harvest is I think, complete. I don't see that many flooded fields anymore. But we also work with the cranberry farmers so that if there is a potential weather event like we had, that we would work with them to hold the water in a strategic place or dump it in advance. Like, we collaborate with the cranberry farmers at this time of year, because it's also November's our rainiest month, so there's a lot of overlap with concern there. So kind of two questions in there.
Through the chair to Councillor Al, and you'll have two different managers answer that as well. As far as the king tides, we will be prepared. We've got the flood walls going up in Britannia, which worked extremely well during this storm. There was no flooding of the Britannia shipyard at all. We'll be out having full-time 24-hour dike patrols to monitor for situations of any sort of potential danger to the dike, to the structure. We will be able to handle it. I'm confident in my staff and the structure, the dike itself. And Mr. Diaz.
Through the chair to Councillor Wolf, I'll just add on to the first question about king tides. Mr. Ford is correct. With the predicted king tides, we're well positioned currently. One of the points of concern for us is when we have a storm surge that accompanies those king tides. That's where we see some overtopping, some wave action. So we carefully monitor those forecasts. And with current technology, they don't sneak up on us. So we get some advance notice. Some of the preparations we do, we have a supply of sandbags ready to go in the works yard. We also have a quick deployment system called an aqua dam that we could raise a segment of dike by 0.3 meters. And I'm happy to provide more details on that piece of apparatus. To your second question about the cranberry farmers, we're in continuous conversations and contact with the cranberry farmers at 2 points in the year when they need water for their harvesting and we're holding back water. And then on the reverse side of that, when we don't need any water in our system and we request them to hold back water, our operations group has them all on speed dial. And they have us on speed dial, so there's continuous conversation and communication with the agricultural group, particularly on the cranberry harvesting.
Thank you for addressing the questions. We appreciate all the staff for being here and all the hard work you've done the last few days. Cheers.
Okay. Any further questions? Now, I just want to add that I'm really looking forward to seeing the conclusions or lessons, learned from this experience after the debriefing being done by staff, because I think this is a real test of our system in the last few days. I think it passed the test, but perhaps, there are lessons to be learned. I think one question people ask me quite often in the last few days was, yes, our pump stations are working fine. However, are we already operating to the maximum of our capacity? So what if, the heavy rain carry on for a few more days, or, the rain was heavier, in the last 3 days? So do we have the capacity really to address the problem? So I think that's one question people ask. And then people also ask a very, very interesting question. They are concerned about the big hole on the site on number 0, the atmosphere site. Still concerned about, with that big hole being there, and the heavy rain and things like that, whether or not it can create any instability to the soil in the neighborhood. Would there be any sinkhole being created and things like that? So I think those are some of the questions people raised in the last few days, and I hope that staff can provide us with more information after the debriefing, and perhaps let us know what are the lessons being learned. So any comments from staff? Milton, you want to say something?
Yes, Mr. Chair, just in regards to the atmosphere site, we have been in contact with the developer and their geotechnical engineer, and that site is being continuously monitored by their geotechnical consultant. In the heavy rainstorm, their dewatering system was in full operation, so there wasn't any issues with the heavy rain as far as the stability of the excavation goes. And as time goes by, we are receiving monitoring reports, and those are also reviewed by an external geotechnical consultant to ensure that there is no risk to the public arising from that open excavation.
Okay, very good. Andy?
Well, thank you through the chair. I just want to make a quick comment. I'm sure the chair is going to comment on it, but just appreciation for all the efforts that staff have made, because it was a significant event, and I think the protection of property and the protection of life is job number 1 for any level of government. And I think from what I saw, from what I heard from the debriefs, what I've heard here today, I think it's important that staff know how appreciative everybody is. I know I've heard that from people in the public, and I've heard it here today too. So I just wanted to say that before over. So thank you very much. I hope that's conveyed to everybody.
Okay, very good. So any manager's report? No? Okay. So Councillor Manati?
Yeah, thank you very much. I just want to echo those comments. At a meeting with ECOM this afternoon, and I'm glad the 600 calls went through our dispatch, and we handled it. So congratulations, and I think if management could thank the men and women at the works yard and all those that took part on it, congratulations and good leadership. We fared way better than most. Anyhow, what I wanted to put on the agenda was referral to staff, which I've had a number of issues up on Smith Road, just north of Sea Island Way, with regard to parking. And the referral to staff would be, if it's moved and seconded, the staff implement some parking regulations on the 2400 block Smith Road with regard to either no parking and or a possible 2-hour timeline parking, in that from the Carpet Place to the garage to Dominion to the transmission place, there are issues with regard to parking there, and they would like something done. And they passed it on to me, and I said I would put it on the agenda for staff to do something and work with bylaws maybe to put in parking regulations there.
I'll move the referral.
Thank you.
Second? Okay. So any further discussion? Alexa?
Thank you through the chair. Should this also include direct consultation with those neighbors or the neighborhood to make sure?
It is in
That's what they want?
a total industrial area. The neighbors, I
Yeah,
mentioned each one's a neighborhood.
Yeah, have you heard from them, but has staff heard from them?
Any comments from staff?
Through the chair to Councillor Liu. No, I'm not aware of hearing from the neighborhood. I have heard from Councillor McNulty on this previously, but I have not heard anything from the neighborhood directly.
Okay. I think this should include, as a friendly, reaching out to them to see what the options are and what they want done, versus us just blanket no stopping in that area.
Okay, I think that's okay, right? So let's.
Yeah, I mean, my understanding would be that staff would have to investigate
that
anyways
anyhow.
to see what the issues are and come back to committee.
Yeah,
Okay.
right.
So move second, so ask, call a question, those in favor? Oppose, motion carry?
Thank you.
Okay. Are there
Move adjournment.
any other matters? Okay, so move second, call a question, motion adjourned, meeting adjourned. Thank you.